Okay, welcome to today, December 3rd meeting of the cloud provider Azure cloud provider subproject meeting. And this is a meeting in the Kubernetes organization. We're under the CNCF Code of Conduct. As such, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube. So let's follow the Code of Conduct and be good to each other. I just want to welcome folks I don't remember attending before. I think Heba, this might be your first time joining this meeting, am I right?
Yes.
We like to welcome new folks to the meeting and just find out real quickly what motivated you to join us today.
So excuse me if it's a little bit crowded here. I'm in the airport. Actually, I just got a lot of good company in QCon, and found out hey, it's not that hard to be a contributor. So let's try. So I believe I have not a lot, but it's like a decent amount of knowledge about AKS and the AKS engine. So I thought maybe this is like a good beginning, good start.
Fantastic. We're really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And so with that, we'll kick off the agenda. Phil, let's see, I'll put the link in the chat just in case folks had any trouble finding it. So the lazy link is now in the chat. The agenda for today is focused around planning for 1.18, since 1.17 is just about to release. And we have a whole list of things that are in the agenda, which are essentially pulled from a planning document that we have. And what I want to do is go through them to make sure people understand what they are. We can talk about who's working on them and what blockers there are for whether or not they can make it into 118. And if identify things that don't belong in cloud provider, there may be things in this list that belong in other projects or other places, or that aren't, there aren't any owners for, or that need help, and or that don't even have issues yet in GitHub. And so what I'd like to do is just sort of crowdsource all that information and get it into the documents. If you would be so kind, if somebody could volunteer to be a note taker, that would be super helpful. Is there anyone willing to kind of take the lead on typing up the outcomes for each of the items we talk about?
I can take notes.
Thank you, Javier. Really appreciate that. And anybody who is here, if you could also add your name to the attending list, we will then have that. That'll be very helpful. So next up, so the first big item in 1.18 is to continue the work to pull or extract the cloud provider from the Kubernetes repo. Linked in the issue are links to the issue, linked in the document are links to the issue and the KEP. The three big items that are identified and tracked in that issue are API throttling, support for the credential provider, and updates to the CSI drivers for file and Azure Disk. Is there anybody, let's see, right now I believe for those, the owners for those three items, I think that Peng Fei and Anish are taking the lead on the API throttling. I Anish, can you speak to that at this point, where we are and what our status is, and if there's any help needed?
So for all the changes that's already there in tree, I think there's one work item which is open, which basically details the 6 steps that we're going to take in order to avoid throttling. Out of that, I think we have 3 of them covered, basically moving to list instead of get, then able to read from the dirty cache for calls that's not required to go out. And I think there are 3 of them remaining. One is basically looking at the retry after header and honoring that. And then there's also one change which was recommended where if we hit throttling, then we still read from whatever cache data that we have. So I think that those 2 or 3 items are still left, and I think that's something that we'll go through and try to get that in 1.18. And these are the changes for entry.
Okay, that's why I needed to clarify. Those are in, and are those changes also going into the out of tree in parallel, or is that separate work to put them out of tree?
So for the out of tree, I think the reason that Pengfei added that was because the cloud node manager that we run, instead of basically making the Azure API calls, instead it would just talk to IMDS and initialize the node. And I think that's what Pengfei demoed in the deep dive. So that will ensure that by having something running on each node, we're not going to be adding more load to what is already there. And the improvements that we're doing now will make sure that whatever we're having right now will not occur later.
Got it. Anybody have any questions about those changes? Okay, great. Is there anybody on this call who can speak to the credential provider? That's actually an area I'm pretty ignorant about.
I think, let me pull it up. I think there is a cap for credential provider.
There is. It's linked at the
down at the bottom.
for the extraction of it. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So what does it actually mean?
Yeah, what is that about?
Okay. Which one here, right?
Yeah.
I think this is for when you want to use like because we need to authenticate against ACR. So
Is this the one that you're talking about?
Which one?
Yes. 1284.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Because I think once we move out of tree, we need to follow the credential provider extraction, like that cap once it gets approved, I guess.
So this is just to pull from ACR?
I don't think it's just for ACR.
But right now, I think that's the
That's
thing
the
that we
primary
use
use case for
Yeah.
it. And let's see. Sorry, we probably shouldn't spend the time on this meeting reading the cap.
Okay, good.
This is definitely an action item for me to understand this cap more. Who owns this right now?
Developer-wise, or
Yeah.
probably Pengfei.
Okay. So I'm going to put on that to review. I think everybody should take a chance to review that if they can. Okay, the next item that's a blocker for out of tree are updates to the CSI drivers to support AZs, support migration, and to support Windows. I saw you were messaging with Andy. Is Andy going to be able to join?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh no, Andy's
Oh,
here.
there you go.
Andy, sorry to interrupt your morning. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah. This meeting moved.
Yes, since yesterday morning our time, obviously too late for you guys. basically it was just Rita, Ace, and I, so we decided to move it because we wanted to go through 118 planning, and so thanks for jumping on. We're reviewing right now the CSI driver updates. Maybe you can speak quickly to the AZ support migration and Windows support status, and if there's any blockers or help that you need. Oh, muted. Andy, you're muted.
I think you mute.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. We're still working on that. Yeah. So there's a few things. First is the Windows support. I think KK is already working on that. And another thing is the migration. In-tree CSI driver, in-tree driver to the CSI driver. So the work is still ongoing, and we are targeting to make it work. I mean, make it better on next version 1.18.
Great. And
Yeah.
is there, that's on track?
Yeah.
Today he said he started working on it, right? Earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've started working on the AZ support, if I understand correctly. Like you're working.
You mean the web-based zone support, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that feature is already completed, and we are going to publish a new release based on that new feature, since a few users require that feature.
For the out of tree or also in tree?
Out of tree.
Out of tree. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not in 117. So for the releases for out of tree, how are releases happening and how are they versioned?
There's agreement that finally all the in-tree code, I mean, like cloud provider Azure will be removed in 1.21.
Right.
That's agreement. But for the recent request, I think we don't have a specific timeline that whether we are going to remove it in the latest versions. We don't have such. Yeah.
Referring to your reference to releasing the support for availability zones, those were released in the out of tree.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering.
For the zone support, we can release. I think should be this end of this week or early next week. We will release a new version for the zone support.
So is there an agreed upon release process and naming and testing already, or is that still to be done to figure out how releases or tests, what the version compatibility policy is between out of tree cloud provider releases and Kubernetes, how it's documented? Is that kind of standard and well known across all the out of tree providers, or is that something we need to define for the Azure provider?
I think this is different for the Azure provider. So we just we can control when to release new versions for the CSI driver.
Right. So what I'm kind of getting to is it's something that's later down in the agenda, which is that I think we need to define as a working group, as a sub-project, what our release policies are, what our compatibility plan is, and what our testing plan is for, forward and backward compatibility between cloud provider and the Kubernetes release. Does that make sense? So like when you make a release for the cloud provider, is that going to be work with Kubernetes 1.16 or 1.17 or 1.18? We need to define what the is.
Yeah. Actually, that feature is a common interface, and it has already documented with the existing Kubernetes versions. For example, for the zone support, some high versions like 1.15, 1.16 already support the zone feature. So it's already documented, and we only need to implement those interfaces and publish the release. For the compatibility support, I think it's already documented in the common CSI documentation in the official websites.
Yeah, I think we're not quite communicating, because what I'm talking about is when we make a release of the cloud provider, say I'm a user and I need to use a cloud provider, I need to understand which versions of Kubernetes I expect that particular release of the cloud provider to work with correctly.
Yeah, we have already documented that in the CSI driver GitHub repo.
But that's just for CSI driver. What about the rest of the things that are included in the out of tree cloud provider?
We can take this.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
table that.
So, I mean, so defining releases, compatibilities, and documentation, that's actually part of 118 planning too.
Yeah.
It's in the doc. So we should talk about this.
Well, what I was trying to understand is if there's already a
Doesn't
good
sound like it.
policy set up for that. It sounds like it's addressed specifically for the
Doesn't-
CSI drivers, but
yeah.
not for the rest of the cloud provider. That's what I
This
mean.
is the only thing I see right
I mean, there's already a version matrix for the cloud provider. If you look at it, it says each version.
now. You're talking about this thing, right? 1 second. Let me set to everybody.
This is the one that I'm talking about.
Yeah, we already linked it.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
so
where-
that's what I needed. We need to add that into the notes.
Okay.
Thanks, Anish. Rita was also showing me the same matrix.
Oh, you mean this?
Oh, to your point, we need that for all the dependencies.
Correct.
Yeah.
Not just for the CSI
Sure,
drivers,
sure.
right? So we need to, so what we need to figure out is if that matrix applies equally to all of the subcomponents
Mhm,
that will fit into the cloud
So
provider.
I'm adding it to this.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I just mean that the CSI driver is more standalone, and yeah.
Okay, so the next item, or actually, does anybody have any questions about CSI drivers? Or any of the other issues related to moving the cloud provider out of E? Okay, great. So the next big item that we've been talking about is making the tests more robust. So there's already an issue for making more real-world scenarios for end-to-end tests that include more scenarios around disk attachment and detachment using the entry providers. What I'd like to know is, do we also have an issue, or are we also tracking in that issue testing the out of tree provider that will be released?
There is currently outage, EDE test for outage tree.
Okay, but this is an issue for adding those tests to the entry.
It's actually to test for entry.
We only have the basic end-to-end test about the attached test, only the basic. So we don't have the something like the performance test or more complex disk attached detached end-to-end test.
Right,
So
because a lot of the issues happened when there's a big sequence of concurrent attaches and detaches, or
We don't have that.
and there are currently no tests for that.
This is an issue that Andy created. It is a good start.
I guess my question is, that's focused on testing the entry drivers.
No, it's
Currently, all the tests are in the CSI driver, and it can also be tested against the entry driver.
yeah, it's
So we use the same test suites.
Okay, That's when you need to.
Both servers, yes.
Applies to both. Okay, thank you.
But I think, yeah, but I think so we need to add a few more complex end-to-end tests for the disk attached detached. Yeah.
And I think Ernest is working a lot of that.
Great.
Right, Ernest?
Yep.
Was
I
that
think, yeah, I think we need to create an issue to track which tests we need to add. Yeah, let me paste the test status issue. I've already created one, and I think we can just add more tests into that issue.
okay? I think that issue is already linked in the agenda document.
I'm not sure. Let me paste it first. Yeah.
If you could check it in the. Oh, it's 189.
Yeah. So this is all the tests we have now. So if we are going to add more tests, I think we can create a new issue and add a link to this summary issue first.
So do you think that issue? Who can own analyzing that issue and determining if it's got a comprehensive set of tests? I guess that's the question I would like to answer. Is that you, Andy, who are analyzing that?
I think I can drop that, but I think I need more resource to add those tests. Yeah.
Okay.
I can drop on that.
And help with adding test scenarios too.
Great. So I marked it with Andy, Ernest, and Rita as looking at that more.
Okay.
Okay. Next one was fixing issues of flaky tests like availability zone and slow tests on VMSS. So I guess those are tests that time out. Is there an issue for tracking that yet, or do we need to create an issue for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody know if there's already an issue for that?
There's no issues for this yet.
Let me see.
All right, well,
I think there is one.
And Ernest, is that you who's owning that item?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Let me see if I can find
Okay, there's already next was removing the hypercube dependency from kube test for 117 and later. There's already a PR for that. And
Hey, Craig, it looks like you're already taking notes.
well, I just noticed nothing changed, so I was adding things as I went.
Okay. I don't think can add more than what you're doing, but I'll keep adding. I have a text editor on the side.
Okay, feel free to keep adding. Oh, you were going to add notes afterwards?
Yeah, because I want to see what you guys are discussing while I'm taking notes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Go ahead. You're doing a great job.
Add value after the fact. That's fine. So there's an open PR for removing the hypercube dependency. Looks like Ernest, you opened the PR. What's this? Looks like it needs review.
Yeah. It's currently reviewed by PingFei.
Okay, and is that something that needs some more eyes as well? Looks like Adelina and Patrick have been.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a pretty big change. So if anyone can take a look at it, it'll be great.
So can you paste the PR link?
It's in the notes document, Andy. In the agenda notes. Under the third bullet under test. But I can put the PR in the chat. There you go. So next is Common Core Library. So the high level concept here is that many different clients that work with Kubernetes on Azure do some common kind of CRUD and management operations through those APIs, things like creating VMs, configuring security groups, creating load balancers, and configuring networks and so forth. And the Azure Client Go is the same, sort of they all go through that. Azure Client Go to do the same operations, and so that code is duplicated in the cloud provider and the cluster API Azure provider in other places, including SRP and the cluster autoscaler. And so the idea is to extract from the cloud provider and these others a common set of code to do those CRUD operations. And so this is kind of a top level list of things to do. Are there people on this call who are interested in helping with sort of analysis and understanding where and how to proceed on this issue or on this effort?
Yeah, I can help with that.
That's great. Thank you, Anish.
I can also take a look too.
Fantastic. So we identified a couple of items here just in the notes. I think we could start well, I think in the context of working in AKS Engine and the cluster autoscaler, we'll probably need some additional collaboration and some design, kind of a design document to describe, what it is, why it is, how to go about building the first iteration of it. The initial concepts that I think came out of the cluster API Azure provider discussion was that would be a natural place to incubate the kind of the POC of this as a library. But that's just an initial idea. If you guys could put your heads together and think about that and see if that makes sense to you, or if it makes sense to do it some other way, we'd love to see some thinking around that. And also,
yeah, I'll also help with it.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so hopefully, it'd be great if, in a couple of weeks, when we could have kind of, I guess the next time we have a meeting, we'll check in and where the thinking is around that. And
yeah, it would be good to see what are the things that's already in common in autoscaler and CapZ possibly. Between the three of you, hopefully, we'll have something.
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry, minor detail.
You can update that.
Okay.
So the next issue is, let's see, I'm just doing a time check. We're already 3 minutes past the half hour. I knew that this was going to take more than 1 half-hour session. Took us a little while to get going. Are you guys free to keep going for a little bit longer? Or does anybody need to drop off?
Okay.
I'm okay.
I'm ready to drop.
You gonna drop, Cecile?
Yeah.
Okay. So configurable provider. So
this one is basically, I think the implementation is almost done. I think we need to first integrate with AKS Engine and then to test with AKS Engine to verify.
okay, great.
Most of the work is probably at this point is probably an AKS engine, unless there's like bug fixes.
This is already merged.
I just put
Okay.
and then
AKS engine changes. Is there already an issue for that?
no, not that I'm aware of. I can have like I can go.
Okay.
Uh,
And anybody who wants to step up and take the implementation of the configurable provider in AKS engine?
if not, we can come back to it and just whoever has time.
Okay, so we'll create issues and figure out which, describe in them kind of what needs to be done. And hopefully folks can pick those up. And then we can triage that through AKS engine, but I'd love to see somebody in this community pick up those changes in AKS engine if we possibly can. Okay, the next item is releases and compatibility. So Rita added the link and he shared about the cloud provider Azure current status that has the release compatibility matrix. I admit that I have not done much thinking about it. I kind of put it in here as a way to think about it, as a way to force me to think about it, but I haven't had a chance to really do that.
How other providers are doing this as well.
Yeah, so let's add that as a task.
I can start looking at it.
Sure.
Yeah, I can own this.
You want to take it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to work with other, like reach out to other providers. See, I'm sure there's already like a process or something.
Well, there is a
or maybe
there is the extraction meeting that happens, the cloud provider extraction meeting. Are you in that meeting?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, if not, I can forward you the invite.
Okay.
And that's a great place to talk about it and collaborate with the other cloud providers to make sure that we're doing something consistent with what they do, but we also need to think about if it's the right thing for our customers as we go forward there. Anything anybody else wants to add about releases and compatibility? Okay.
So
telemetry.
So this one, the thought behind this was to hopefully, like, this is one that's going to grow over time. So hopefully we can take this release to start thinking about it, even if we are not going to work on it. Like, come up with requirements, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. This one, I think, probably should be used.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. I will assign that to myself. I will create the issue, and then it looks like.
And I already have like.
Yeah, you had a few proposals for.
That I want to see right away.
Right. So. So that's.
So for this issue, we already have the promises metrics for every operations.
You have the what matrix?
Prometheus.
Oh, the
promises. Yeah.
Okay. So
like the attach, let attach detect disk every operation will be counted.
Can you provide the link to? Is it either documented or is it in code?
It's already in the code. Yeah.
Can you provide?
But I'm not sure whether about the whole story of telemetry. Yeah, we already did some, but just then you figure out.
Yeah. So please add to the document the link to the code so that I can see what's already there as I'm doing kind of a design or a spec for what we would want.
Sure.
Thank you. Anything anybody else has to add there?
Actually, Andy, are you aware of any discussions around already? Because you've been a part of a lot of the
release
extraction meetings, right? I just.
Oh, you mean
my brain. Release some compatibility discussions. Are you aware of anything already? Andy?
Mm, no, actually, I'm not aware of that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, just check.
Okay, and then to close things out, there's some legacy things that were in the notes and agenda document from well before I started operating this meeting. I wanted to see if there were a bunch of things that were marked as pinned for version 114, and I wanted to just kind of, before I deleted them, see if any of them needed additional work or tracking rather than just delete them, if that makes sense.
I love the first one.
Stability improvements, end-to-end testing and performance optimization. I think we've captured those in a lot of the above, but are there other items that anybody knows of on this call that we haven't captured or represented in this line item? Okay, then I'm going to delete that. I'm going to actually mark it as strikeout, just so that we don't lose anything there. External cloud provider target stage links to, wow, the generic cloud provider issues link.
Yeah, it's already beta now. Yeah, so I think we can remove this.
No.
Yeah, I think they're all old, but I just want to make sure we're not losing anything. Same with Azure Disk, Azure File.
Yeah, already beta, and already soon. We just support it in the latest version. Yeah,
great.
And cross resource group already supported.
Great.
And other flash volume CSI driver. Yeah, I think we can remove that.
What is DYSK?
DYSK is like a shared disk. Just wrote by Cal, and finally it's abandoned.
Okay. So
you mean deprecated?
Deprecated, yeah.
Okay.
No one maintains that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad to see that all of those things have been either followed through on or were decided not to be done. Okay, so that concludes the prepared agenda. Does anybody on the call have anything else to bring up that we should talk about?
I had one question around, like, in terms of flaky tests, like I've been seeing the Windows one continue to fail on test grid. Do we know why?
So I was looking at that earlier today. We've noticed that the deployment phase is failing in AKS Engine for the Windows, for a lot of the Windows jobs, and it's happened like 5 times out of the last 7 days for just one of the runs. I have a suspicion that AKS Engine is not doing something right with ARM templates when extra extensions are added to a VM, because we only see it in the profiles where we added a lot of extensions. So I'm looking at that, and I have an email thread with some people from the ARM team asking for either documentation on what we need to do to fix that, or help troubleshooting, that I'll share if there's any progress with the AKS team.
Okay, yeah, I've been seeing it like daily, or twice a day. So.
Okay, great. Thanks for.
Yeah, what I'm mainly seeing is I actually started a thread in the upstream team about this with Ernest. We're seeing cases where the ARM deployments just fail with something saying that there's a conflict, and I've been digging into that. So if we're seeing that same behavior, that's what I'm looking into. If there's other failures, I think we should track them separately.
Okay. You got Ernest helping you with that. Is there any other help that you need to resolve this? Because obviously we want our tests to be.
I think that I need help from people from the ARM team to figure out if we're doing something wrong with the ARM templates or if it's in a bug in the way the ARM is deploying resources. But I think we've got the right people.
Okay, are they then they're being responsive?
The contact I had added a few more people and they responded with an initial response. So if that picks up, I'll add AKS Engine to that, but I didn't want to do that well if it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Okay, just let me know if I can help or if it needs escalation.
Yeah, I think it doesn't right now, but I will stay on top of that.
Okay, great. Okay, anybody, anything else? Great. Well, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate going through this with the community, with the team, and we will see you next time.
See you.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.